substances have increased sharply over the past decade. According to the Government Accountability Office, from January 01 to June 2013, 168 shortages of these drugs were reported. Of those, almost 70% began in 2007 or later. The shortages lasted an average of 1 year, and some lasted multiple years. Many of the affected drugs were pain relievers, anti-anxiety medications, and stimulants. According to FDA, these shortages can pose a significant threat to public health. Shortages can delay or deny needed care for patients, cause the use of less effective and more risky medications, and burden both patients and providers in other ways. According to one study, hospitals spent $216 million annually on labor costs alone to manage the effects of drug shortages. Many of the drugs affected by shortages are pain medications that present a serious risk of addiction to patients. So, of course, doctors need to be cautious when they prescribe, and when they're truly needed, these medicines should at least be available for doctors as a treatment option. Against this background, in May 2012, Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island and I asked the Government Accountability Office to investigate these shortages. The Controlled Substance Act requires the Drug Enforcement Administration to manage the amounts of controlled substances and that are permitted to be manufactured or imported for medical use each year in the United States. It does this through a quota process, which also involves setting individual quotas for various manufacturers / producers. As a result, Senator Whitehouse and I asked the Government Accountability Office to focus on DEA's administration of quota process and coordination between DEA and FDA to prevent and mitigate shortages. In February of this year, Government Accountability Office issued its report, which has led then to today's hearing. While I'm glad to finally see the results of GAO's review, this report could have been finished much sooner if DEA had cooperated with GAO from the start. DEA refused to comply with GAO's request for information from a particular DEA database for over a year. In fact, I had to get personally involved in the process to make sure GAO had the information it needed. I understand that certain information must be kept closely held, but Congress, through Government Accountability Office, simply must have access to information required to conduct oversight, and this report is an excellent example of why. In short, GAO found that DEA hasn't effectively administered the quota process and that DEA and FDA haven't established a sufficient and collaborative relationship relating to their management shortages. According to the report, DEA hasn't met its annual deadline to propose aggregate production quotas or to establish bulk procurement and manufacturing quotas for individual manufacturers in any year from 2001 through 2014. Manufacturers report that these delays have prevented them from adequately planning ahead to meet demand. GAO also concluded DEA's weak internal controls, including controls to ensure data reliability, may hinder its ability to manage the process. For example, according to GAO, the database DEA uses to manage the process is often inaccurate, and DEA doesn't adequately review the quality of information housed in it. GAO estimated that in 2011, 44% of records in the database contained errors, and in 2012, 10% of the records in the database contained errors. Now that is a positive trend, obviously moving in the right direction. It still reflects a very unacceptable high error rate. GAO also found that DEA was missing critical information about the quota process because it doesn't employ performance measures or monitor data to determine whether its process is effective. In addition, DEA doesn't have written policies, procedures, or guidance in place to guide its staff managing quotas. According to GAO, this deficiency threatens DEA's ability to oversee a highly complex process as institutional memory is lost because of staff turnover. Finally, and perhaps most concerning, GAO found that DEA and FDA simply don't have sufficiently collaborative relationships to work together to manage the drug quota process and to prevent shortages. The two agencies don't even agree on the definition of drug shortages. This lack of coordination and collaboration severely hinders their ability to work together for the benefit of patients that need these medicines. At the conclusion of the report, GAO offered a series of recommendations to both agencies to try to improve management of the quota process. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about a number of them today. It was heartening that the Department of HHS agreed with two recommendations directed to the FDA, but it was disappointing that DEA didn't specifically agree or disagree with the recommendations applicable to it, but instead chose to object to certain aspects of the report. For if there is one thing that the report makes clear, it's that the quota system for these drugs isn't functioning as it should, and it seems apparent that both DEA and FDA need to make changes in order for that to help them. I welcome our witnesses today who have an opportunity to introduce in a minute, and now I recognize our co-chair, Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Did you announce, I understand we have a vote at 10:15.
No, we'll break for that.
Oh, we'll break for it. Okay, yeah. Thank you. First of all, let me say that I'm a fan of DEA, and this is a difficult arena in which to work. And so over the many years, I've seen a lot of good work that DEA has done, and a lot of criminals brought to heel and in prison who sell drugs all over the world. But today, we're here to discuss the management of what's called a controlled substances quota process. And this is mandated by law. The Drug Enforcement Administration is required to determine the amount of a controlled substance a drug manufacturer receives and the drugs it can produce. The process was the subject of the GAO report, obviously, that's before us today. The report, as I understand it, could not establish a causal link between shortages of drugs containing controlled substances and DEA's management of the quota process. DEA sets the aggregate production quota for each basic class of Schedule 1 and 2 controlled substances. Then it sets bulk and procurement quotas for individual manufacturers. DEA does not and cannot tell individual manufacturers what prescription drugs and in what formulation to produce with their quota allotment. Manufacturers, in fact, make those decisions. Despite the fact that the GAO report did not find that DEA's management led to shortages of drugs containing controlled substances, and I want to point that out, it did raise some issues. First, DEA has not met deadlines to establish aggregate production quotas, bulk manufacturing or procurement quotas required by its own regulations for any of the past 13 years. And DEA does not dispute this. Manufacturers cannot accurately plan for the upcoming production year without timely notification from DEA of what their quota allotment will be. So this does mean a great deal. Even though DEA has the regulatory power to change these deadlines. This is important. It has taken no steps to do so. This is troubling. Second, the GAO report notes that when a manufacturer requests a supplemental quota, DEA takes an average of 58 days to respond. Given that manufacturers typically apply for supplemental quotas to avert a shortage, this response time should be quicker and consistent with the 30-day time frame that is now required by the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act. I understand that DEA's quota section is understaffed and that the volume of quota applications it receives has increased, both of which may contribute to its lengthy response time. However, I'm also told that there are 3 vacancies out of the 10 staff, and I don't quite understand why these 3 vacancies haven't been filled. It seems to me that DEA has the authority it needs, if it's a question of fees, to see that those fees are adjusted to permit this unit to operate at its maximum. And that is my belief, Mr. Chairman. They should quickly hire these 3 people and get on with it. Third, DEA has taken a number of steps to improve the accuracy of the quota system. But as of 2012, there still was a 10% error rate. Fourth, there must be clear and open communication between DEA and the Food and Drug Administration. Now, these agencies are required by law to jointly address any shortages of drugs containing controlled substances. So I was happy to learn that the Memorandum of Understanding to increase communication between these agencies was recently updated and signed. And Mr. Ramazizi, let me commend you for that. So I hope DEA will take certain additional steps to establish and implement formal procedures to identify the information it will share with FDA regarding potential and existing shortage of drugs containing controlled substances, as well as a time frame for doing so. I think we're on the right track. I think improvements are being made, and there has not been a quota-related drug shortage since 2011. So I hope we can build on this report and do the right thing. Last year, I chaired a caucus hearing on prescription drugs and heroin abuse, in which we praised DEA's work to shut down pill mills and rogue online pharmacies and collect unused prescription medications. So DEA has made strong contributions to reducing prescription drug abuse nationwide, and I want to point that out. However, drug abuse continues to wreak havoc throughout the country, and we are in the midst of an epidemic that kills essentially 44 people every day. Given the number of prescription opioids dispensed in our country over the past 14 years, it's quadrupled. That's amazing. It's quadrupled. We've actually had hearings where we learn when heroin prices are up, prescription opioids go up because they're cheaper, so that there is a cost and effect relationship between the two. But given the number of prescription opioids dispensed in the United States over the past 14 years and the fact that it's quadrupled, there has been no overall change in the amount of pain that Americans report. I think it's worth taking a closer look at the quota process to see if it can be used as another tool to prevent prescription drug abuse and overdose deaths. I would like to point out that with respect to a young man who happens to be a constituent of mine who was in a cell for 5 days in San Diego with no attention at all, I, on August 8th, 2014, wrote a letter to the administrator of the DEA. That's over a year ago. I have received no response to that letter. Subsequently, I wrote a second letter dated April 28th of 2015, and to the United States Department of Justice, and I intend to pursue this. And I would ask, and my first question will be, will I receive a response to the letter I wrote on August 8th, 2014? So, actually, it's July 14th, 2014, and August 8th, 2014, the two letters, and I have not received a response to either, which candidly, I very much regret. And I think when we don't get responses to our letters, Mr. Chairman, that colors our view of the agency, particularly when we're writing about a constituent who suffered from a real lapse in process. So thank you very much.
Yes, and I would ratify what she says about letters. I find myself in the same boat from time to time. And if it makes a difference, if a chairman thinks that Senator Feinstein ought to have her letters answered, then I put my oar in the same boat she's in.
Thank you. Appreciate the oar.
Yeah, okay. Even though the votes started, I want to introduce everybody and then we'll break. At this time, our panel of witnesses, first witness is Mr. Joseph Ranazizi. He is Deputy Assistant Administrator, Office Diversion Control, DEA. He is responsible for overseeing and coordinating major drug investigations related to pharmaceuticals and precursor chemicals, clandestine laboratories, and synthetic drugs, as well as establishing drug production quotas. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in pharmacy from Butler University and a law degree from Detroit College of Law, Michigan State University. He's registered pharmacist in the state of Indiana and a member of the Michigan State Bar Association. Second witness, Captain Valerie Jensen. Captain Jensen, Associate Director of the Drug Shortage Staff within the Food and Drug Administration. Captain Jensen worked in clinical pharmacist, Indian Health Service hospitals, Arizona and New Mexico for 9 years before joining Food and Drug Administration. She's been with the drug shortage staff at the FDA for the past 14 years, and she received a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy, University of Iowa. And if you have any connections to Iowa, please tell me. Our final witness is Dr. Marcia Cross. Dr. Cross is Director for the Health Care Team within the U.S. Government Accountability Office. She is responsible for overseeing GAO evaluations in the area of pharmaceutical regulation, among others. Dr. Cross began her career with GAO in 1983 and has been a member of the Health Care Team since 1996. She's received multiple awards during her career, including GAO's Distinguished Service Award. Dr. Cross received her bachelor's degree from the College of William and Mary. She also holds a master's degree and doctorate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We will adjourn momentarily, adjourn now for a few moments. So.
Thank you.
Call on Mr. Ranazisi at this point. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Grassley, members of the Caucus on International Narcotics Control, on behalf of Administrator Michelle Linhart and the men and women of the Drug Enforcement Administration, I thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the recent report by GAO concerning the management of quota process for controlled substances. First, it's important to put DEA's work into context. DEA annually establishes the aggregate production quota, or the APQ, for approximately 200 Schedule 1 and 2 controlled substances, and establishes and revises over 4,000 individual quotas for more than 400 bulk and dosage form manufacturers. I'd like to emphasize that the GAO review disclosed 40 FDA-reported shortages of drug products containing Schedule 2 controlled substances between January 2010 and June of 2013, and of those, only 7 were alleged to have been caused or exacerbated by quotas. The remaining 33 reported shortages of drugs containing Schedule 2 controlled substances were caused by other non-quota related factors such as manufacturing delays, capacity issues, and product quality issues. Nonetheless, since 2011, DEA has implemented several measures to mitigate any effect quotas might have on the availability of pharmaceutical controlled substances and to improve our efficiency in administering the quota process. For example, the implementation of the online quota management system in 2011 provided DEA with a more efficient platform to establish individual manufacturing quotas that are requested prior to and after the deadline imposed on DEA to establish the quota. In fact, DEA met this statutory requirement most recently for quota years 14 and 2015, and DEA expects to continue to meet this requirement. Also, beginning in 2013, APQs, DEA included an additional 25% of the estimated medical, scientific, and research needs as part of the amount necessary to ensure the establishment and maintenance of reserve stocks. DEA expects that maintaining this reserve in the aggregate production quota will mitigate any adverse public effects if an unforeseen event results in substantial disruption to the amount of controlled substances available for legitimate need. And when we talk about an unforeseen event, it would be a catastrophic event involving a manufacturer. DEA and FDA have also finalized a memorandum of understanding that will allow us to share information efficiently and quickly. In fact, we've already began to share information, albeit not quote information, but information related to new drugs and current trends of drugs of abuse. The work plans will specifically outline what information is to be shared and the time frames for doing so. Completion of the work plans will address 3 of GAO's recommendations. Now, DEA has carefully considered the rest of GAO's recommendations. We've established policies and procedures to ensure quota data is accurate. We routinely monitor and analyze the data and have established policies and procedures for staff administering the quota process. We continue to evaluate reasonable performance measures related to quotas, such as tracking the number of incomplete or revised quota applications or the amount of time to process or respond to a quota application, recognizing that a reasonable or prompt amount of time to evaluate and respond to each application is highly dependent on many different factors. In addition to the publication dates of the APQ and the revised APQ, other variables that affect the quota review and evaluation process include the completeness of the application, the accuracy and veracity of the applicant's justification for quota, the responsiveness of the applicant to additional clarifying questions, and the inherent complexity of the submission and supporting documents. DEA acknowledges that the regulations imposing early timeframes for quota are unrealistic in practice. We're working to determine what modifications need to be made to allow manufacturers sufficient time to estimate and provide adequate justification for annual quota requests, keeping in mind that DEA needs sufficient time to consider all applications, propose and finalize the APQ, and issue individual manufacturing and procurement quotas in advance of the relevant quota year. DEA remains committed to establishing aggregate production quotas for each basic class of controlled substance in Schedule 2 that will provide the estimated medical, scientific, research, and industrial needs of the United States for lawful export requirements and for the establishment and maintenance of reserve stocks. More importantly, we're happy to report that since the Food and Drug Administration Safety Innovation Act, or FDASIA, was enacted in 2012, there have been no requests for expedited quota review due to potential shortages. I appreciate the invitation to appear today, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranasisi. Now, Captain Jensen.
Thank you. Chairman Grassley and members of the caucus, I'm Captain Valerie Jensen, Associate Director of the Drug Shortage Staff in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA. I wanted to let you know, Senator Grassley, that I am an Iowan. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, and my whole family is in Iowa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Drug shortages do pose a serious, significant public health threat affecting patients across the United States, including patients who are in need of drugs to treat life-threatening diseases such as cancer, serious infections, and malnutrition. Shortages are usually preceded by a production disruption. Once a manufacturer experiences any type of discontinuance or interruption in manufacturing, a shortage may occur if other manufacturers can't increase production quickly enough to make up the loss. These production disruptions can be triggered by several factors. Most often, production disruptions leading to shortages are the result of failures within manufacturing facilities that result in failures of product or facility quality. FDA and other stakeholders have important roles to play in addressing drug shortages in the U.S. The number of new drug shortages in the U.S. rose steadily between 2005 and the all-time high in 2011. After a series of interventions, including enactment of the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA, by Congress, and FDA outreach to a variety of stakeholders, the number of new drug shortages has declined significantly. With early and timely notification by manufacturers, FDA helped prevent 101 shortages in 2014. FDASIA broadened the scope of the early notification provisions. The current rate of notifications per month continues to be over double the rate observed before FDASIA. Once notified of a pending shortage, FDA staff has a variety of tools to help prevent or mitigate shortages. Our shortage staff begins by verifying that an actual shortage exists or may occur. Before concluding that a shortage exists, FDA applies a standard process which involves a careful review by our shortage staff of data from multiple sources. When shortages staff determines that a shortage either exists or is likely to occur, shortage staff members coordinate efforts to mitigate and, whenever possible, prevent the shortage. When FDA is aware of a potential, imminent, or ongoing shortage, the agency offers to work with the affected manufacturers to find ways to prevent or mitigate the shortage and lessen a shortage's impact on patients. Some of our possible actions that FDA can take include identifying the extent of the shortfall, determining if other manufacturers are willing and able to increase production to make up the gap, expediting FDA inspections and reviews of submissions from manufacturers that are attempting to restore production, expediting FDA inspections and reviews of submissions from manufacturers that are interested in starting new production or increasing existing production of products in shortage. We exercise temporary enforcement discretion for new sources of medically necessary drugs. We work with manufacturers to ensure adequate investigation into the root cause of quality problems. And we explore risk mitigation measures for products that are initially not meeting established standards so that they can be allowed to be used safely. When a shortage is unavoidable, FDA posts the shortage on the online drug shortage database on the FDA website, and we include the reasons reported by the manufacturers for the shortage, as well as the estimated duration, if known. It's important to note that shortages of controlled substances, including those subject to the DEA-established quotas, limiting the amount that can be produced, are normally caused by the same factors as non-controlled substances. These factors mainly involve quality problems at the manufacturer or specific drugs that are experiencing quality failures. The last time that a manufacturer reported a shortage that was related to a DEA established quota was in 2011. And since that time, all shortages of controlled substances have been reported to be caused by other factors. So after FDA receives a notification of a discontinuation or an interruption, FDASIA requires FDA to determine whether that notification relates to a controlled substance, subject to quota under the Controlled Substance Act. And then we coordinate with DEA as appropriate on a response. For example, FDA may work with DEA to enable a manufacturer to increase its allotted quota if this step would help avoid a shortage of a product. FDA has taken important steps to improve processes for mitigating and preventing shortages. To help streamline and improve communications, FDA and DEA have developed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, which we have recently updated. The MOU does set forth steps and procedures for more consistent and efficient exchange and tracking of information between the two agencies. In October 2013, FDA released a strategic plan called for in FDASIA, both to improve FDA's response to potential imminent or existing shortages and to advance longer-term approaches for addressing the underlying causes of shortages to prevent supply disruptions from occurring in the first place. We are actively working on implementing the actions identified in the plan. For example, we've created a dedicated data system that focuses solely on collecting data related to shortages. This new data system will enable FDA to more efficiently track and assess issues related to drug shortages. Drug shortages do remain a significant public health issue in the U.S. Addressing them is a top priority for FDA. By collaborating with external stakeholders and by exercising regulatory flexibility in appropriate cases, FDA has had a substantial positive impact on shortages. It's extremely important that FDA and DEA have good coordination and communication when there is an impending shortage of a controlled substance which is reported to be related to quota, or for which increased quota could help address or prevent the shortage. We look forward to continued collaboration with DEA and to further our shared mission of serving the American public.
Thank you, Captain Jensen. Now, Dr. Cross.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Co-Chairman Feinstein, and members of the caucus. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss our recent report on DEA's quota-setting process for controlled substances and its coordination with FDA during shortages of Schedule II prescription drugs. As you are aware, DEA and FDA are required by statute to coordinate when a shortage occurs for drugs containing controlled substances that are subject to DEA quotas. Senators Grassley and Whitehouse asked GAO to undertake this work because of concerns that DEA's quota-setting process was contributing to certain drug shortages. Manufacturers complained that the amount of time it took DEA to respond to their annual and supplemental quota applications caused or exacerbated shortages of some of these drugs. 10 different manufacturers each reported to FDA that quota-related problems caused 7 of the 40 shortages of Schedule II drugs in the period we examined. We found that DEA has not effectively administered the quota process. The agency did not meet its regulatory deadlines for establishing any of the 3 types of required quotas for any year from 2001 through 2014. DEA was generally 5 to 6 months late in issuing these quotas. DEA also took nearly 60 days on average to respond to supplemental quota requests. However, we could not confirm whether DEA's lack of timeliness in establishing quotas caused or exacerbated these specific shortages because DEA's data were not sufficiently reliable for us to conduct an independent analysis by, for example, comparing whether the agency's actions differed for drugs in shortage and drugs not in shortage. Instead, we found that DEA's weak internal controls jeopardized the agency's ability to effectively manage these complex responsibilities. The shortcomings we found in the administration of this process include the following. DEA did not have adequate controls to ensure the reliability of the database it uses to track manufacturers' quota applications and record its quota decisions. Did not have performance measures related to setting quotas or ensuring an adequate and uninterrupted supply of controlled substances. Did not monitor its data system to assess its performance. And did not have protocols, policies, training materials, or other documentation to manage how the agency processes quota applications and establishes quota for individual manufacturers. We also found that a lack of effective coordination may hinder the ability of DEA and FDA to address future drug shortages. First, the two agencies disagree about what constitutes a drug shortage. Without a common definition, it is unclear whether their efforts at coordination can be successful. Second, although FDA established policies and procedures for operating across agency boundaries, DEA officials told us they have no plans to take any similar steps. Finally, the agencies spent the past 2.5 years negotiating a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, to allow them to share proprietary information, but the agreement expires in 3 years, and it requires that separate work plans be developed to specify precisely what information can be shared. Our report included multiple recommendations to DEA to improve its administration of the quota process and better coordinate with FDA regarding drug shortages. Although DEA and FDA have finalized the MOU as we recommended, they still must outline their specific information sharing so that they are positioned to coordinate for any future drug shortage. In conclusion, the shortcomings that we identified prevent DEA from having reasonable assurance that they are effectively administering the quota setting process, including for providing an adequate and uninterrupted supply of drugs for legitimate medical need. We will be interested to see DEA's new policies, procedures, and protocols, as mentioned by Mr. Ranazizi, as part of our follow-up on our recommendations. Chairman Grassley, Co-Chairman Feinstein, this concludes my prepared remarks. I would be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Mr. Ranazizi, I'm going to start out with something that Mrs. Feinstein brought up about not getting a letter answered. I first wrote to DEA seeking answers what happened to Mr. Chong. That's a tragedy where DEA agents locked a college student in a holding cell in San Diego and left him there for 5 days without food or water. Mr. Chong attempted to kill himself while in the cell. The DEA answered my letter a year later, but cited ongoing IG report as a reason for not answering some of my questions. The IG issued a report on the matter July 2014. The report was shocking. Many of its factual findings are difficult to believe, including that no one in DEA field office heard Mr. Chong banging and yelling from inside the cell for 5 days, and the report even suggested that DEA personnel may have attempted to cover up the incident. So in August 2014, I wrote a letter to the administrator seeking answers to questions raised by the report, but it's been now 8 months, and I still don't have a response from DEA to these questions. There is no ongoing IG investigation to hide behind now. I wrote a follow-up letter April 21 and haven't received a response to that letter. I did recently receive a letter from DOJ informing me about the discipline DEA imposed on the officers involved. Apparently, the most severe penalty imposed was a 7-day suspension. That seems to be astounding, considering the disregard for human life that was evidenced by that incident of Mr. Chong. Even DOJ told me that they had quote-unquote serious concerns about the adequacy of the discipline, but this information's only deepened my concern to get answers. So one question and only one question. Can I expect an answer to my letter by the end of this month? And if not, please tell me why I can't. At what point do I have to conclude that DEA is hiding something about what happened here?
Senator Grassley and Senator Feinstein, this was a regrettable, tragic event, an incident, and I can't speak for DEA or the department about when the letter is going to come to you or be sent to you. However, I promise you that I'll take it back to the department and to DEA, and I'll get an answer for you. If I gave you a date right now, I couldn't make that promise. But I can tell you, I can promise you that I will take it back to both the department and DEA and find out.
I appreciate that you might not be in a position to make that judgment, but 26 days between now and the end of the month seems to me to be adequate, that we ought to be able to get an answer. The next question I direct to you and to Captain Jensen. One of the Government Accountability Office's recommendation was that DEA and FDA should promptly address the issue of information sharing between two organizations. It seems clear that increased information sharing may help reduce shortages. I was pleased to see that since the GAO report was issued, we have an MOU between your agencies being updated, but it appears that that memorandum doesn't address precisely what information to be shared or who it will be shared with. So the question to each of you, to explain how you expect these important details to be handled and how long you expect to take your agencies to reach an agreement on them.
You want to go? It's up to you. Ladies
I'll
first.
start, Senator Grassley. We do have the MOU in place, and it allows us now to share what we need to share. So all of the information for drug shortage, which would be when we hear about a company that needs additional quota to help address a shortage or to help prevent a shortage, we can share all of that information right now with DEA under the MOU. The work plans will provide additional details, but right now everything we need to share, we can share to help make sure that we're addressing and preventing shortages.
May I add?
Yes, please do.
Captain Jensen's absolutely perfect. Additionally, this is not just a quota MOU. This involves all aspects of the interaction between DEA and FDA or CEDAR or HHS for that matter. The work plans will establish points of contact and what information be shared, but we're in the process of sharing. Under 21 U.S.C. 873, we could share information. And in the MOU makes it clear that prior to the establishment of the work plans, we can continue to establish and share information, and we have. And I was just on the phone with Dr. Throckmorton last week discussing 3 different issues revolving drugs, information that wouldn't have been shared a year ago, but it's being shared now.
When would the work plans be finalized?
I know they'll be very soon. We're working to get those finalized as quickly as we can.
Okay. And are you talking about months or weeks or days?
I would hope that it's more weeks than months.
Okay. I would ask Mr. Ranazzi and Ms. Cross to participate in this question. According to the GAO report, DEA has not met the annual deadlines established by DEA regulation to propose aggregate production quotas and establish bulk procurement and manufacturing quotas for individual manufacturers in any year from 2001 through 2014. This begins the entire quota management process off on the wrong foot, negatively impacting manufacturers' ability to plan for production. It's not acceptable for DEA to miss these deadlines year after year, usually for as long as 5 months. What do each of you, and I'll start with Dr. Cross, think is the key to ensuring that DEA can start meeting its own regulatory deadlines in these areas?
Well, Senator Grassley, I think that Mr. Ranazzi indicated that they are considering changing what the regulatory requirements are, and I'm not positioned to speak whether or not that's appropriate. Certainly, they have been challenged severely to meet the current deadlines and have not proposed so far that those regulatory deadlines be changed. The manufacturers told us that the timing has been the key factor affecting their ability to ensure a consistent and steady supply of these medically necessary drugs, that when they receive their quota allocation in December, that's simply too late for them to be able to plan the next year's production process. And so I think it's a very positive step that in the past 2 years, in 2014 and in 2015, DEA was able to issue their production decisions, the allocations for the quotas in the fall, somewhat earlier. They did meet the October 1st statutory deadline, but their regulatory deadline is July 1st. I think that there's still room for them to be making steps to have better information to move forward. And if that means that they need to do more to train manufacturers or to take other kinds of steps that would reduce the number of supplemental applications that they receive, then those are things they could all consider.
Mr. Ranasisi, and then I'll call on Senator Feinstein.
Currently, manufacturers don't have to report their need until May 1st of the preceding quota year. That means that on May 1st, we get quite a few applications, and then our scientists have to look at that in order to set the APQ. Now, I take full responsibility for not changing the regs, but the problem was the May 1st reg was mirrored the 1970 Controlled Substances Act requirement. In 1976, Congress pushed back the requirement for individual manufacturing quotas to October 1, which is where it is today, but we never changed the regulation. If we would have changed the regulation, we would have met those dates, but we didn't. And there's all sorts of reasons why we didn't, but and we're going to work on it, and we're going to change that reg. But regardless, over the last 2 years, we have met the requirement to get the APQ out and get those letters out. And the reason is because we went to a totally electronic system, the quota management system, which was put into place in 2011. Now, we could talk about the errors that were in the quota management system in 2011 and 2012, but the fact is 2011 was the first year the quota management system was implemented. And in fact, a lot of those errors were data entry errors because we had to populate the system manually in 2011. So we expected there would be errors. In 2012, that went from a 40% or 44% error rate down to 12% error rate. And the system on rebuilds and improvements has gotten better and more efficient. We don't expect any errors. We expect to continue to have the APQ and the individual manufacturing quotas out either before or prior to October 1 for the future, because the system allows us to do that. It takes a great burden off the 8 scientists that I have working on quotas right now.
Senator Feinstein.
I recognize that this has nothing to do with Mr. Ranasisi, but I just want the record to reflect what actually happened with Joe Chung. He was a college student in San Diego. He was held in a detention cell without food or water for 5 days, his hands handcuffed behind his back. He nearly died. When he was found, he was suffering from dehydration and kidney failure. There was a settlement of $4 million. This was a serious infraction. The discipline has been very light. It blows my mind because there were a number of people involved. A supervisory special agent got a 7-day suspension without pay. A special agent received a 5-day suspension without pay, and 4 special agents received letters of reprimand. Now, this was essentially somebody that was incarcerated and found out about it, and all of these agents knew that, and nobody did anything. And I just hope this is not the DEA of today, because if it is, you won't have any support up here. I'd ask that my letters, which have not been responded to by DEA, that are a year old, there are 2 of them, be placed in the record, and a letter that responds to a letter of mine from the Department of Justice also be placed in the record.
Without objection.
The The charge, and I just want the record for agents 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, was inattention to duty. The charge for supervisory special agent was failure to exercise proper supervision. So this is a whole unit that essentially did not do their duty. And I very much hope that this is not happening anywhere else. And I'd like the record to reflect that. To move on to your area, Mr. Ranazizi, and what about the hiring? It's my understanding that you have room to hire and funds to hire 3 new quota scientists. As I understand the salary, the range is from $78,000 to $120,000 a year. It seems to me that these people should have been hired, and they haven't. What's the problem?
There's a multitude of problems. I believe it's 2 openings right now.
Okay.
And we've attempted to hire people. The couple of problems are they have to get through the background. They have to get through the drug screening process. They have to get through suitability review. And we've had great candidates who couldn't get through that review process.
What?
It's,
You mean they were addicts, or they,
they just didn't meet the criteria set by DEA and DOJ and OPM for suitability for the position because of prior drug use or because something in their background did not allow them
well,
to
I don't think
proceed.
you want somebody with prior drug use or a cloudy background, but you mean nobody else applies and there isn't any recruitment effort that the government makes?
There is. We try and recruit regularly for these positions. These are highly technical scientific positions. We have people with master's degrees and PhDs in those positions. When we do get a good qualified candidate, sometimes the system takes long, and when we offer them the position, they decline because they've taken other positions. See, I'm not necessarily a proponent of how we're screening our new employees, but the fact is there's procedures in place for screening. If they can't make suitability, they can't make background, or they can't get past the drug screening process or the drug use survey, then they're not going to be hired. They're not going to be hired.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this to me is unbelievable. I would like to suggest that we write a letter to Michelle Lenhart. Let's see if we get a response and essentially say what's been laid out and ask her for a plan to recruit these scientists. If you have to go to universities for graduates in physics or whatever the department is, they ought to do it. I mean, I know a lot of very good college students who would love to have this job beginning at $78,000 a year.
I'll join you in the letter.
Okay, we'll prepare it and do it together, and maybe Senator Whitehouse would like to join with us too.
And we would love to have them.
Okay,
Senator,
well, we'll stir up the pot a little bit.
I appreciate
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse?
Thank you. First, I wanted to express my appreciation to Senator Grassley for the work that he has done, that we've done together, actually, to try to get the underlying GAO report out and express at least my dismay about the pushback that GAO received from DEA. It may very well be that the commercially sensitive information objection was legit, but if so, it was very badly handled. And considering the nature of legislative oversight, I'll tell you, I think there's an open question about whether that was a foil or not, whether you just really didn't want to be reviewed by GAO because you didn't know what the report was going to say, or perhaps did know what the report was going to say. So it opens up what for me is a broader concern. I was the U.S. Attorney in Rhode Island, and I am immensely proud of the DEA work that I saw at the investigative level. I think that DEA as an investigative agency has really done some wonderful things, and many of its agents have done truly heroic things, and I've had the privilege to see some of that firsthand. Once you get to the administrative section of DEA and you're managing things as administrators over and over and over again, I have seen unfortunate circumstances, delay, prevarication. I mean, I'm at the point where it's starting to look to me like DEA is an agency that cannot manage administrative and regulatory responsibilities, and maybe they should be moved elsewhere, and it should just purely become an investigative agency with no more administrative responsibilities. It happens over and over and over again, and you know, Senator Feinstein is a very serious and a very senior and a very fair-minded person, and when she is...
Leave out the senior, all the rest I like.
All right. She has Senate seniority. You know, when she's saying the kind of things that she just said to you, you really have to pay attention to that. That's, you know, if an agency completely loses support on a bipartisan basis up here, that's not a good place to be. And at this point, I know that there's going to be a big leadership change, and we'll have a voice, I suspect, in the confirmation process and in trying to lay out our priorities. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you know that I think, on my part, but also on the part of many, many others up here, the dissatisfaction with DEA's level of capability and performance as an administrative regulator runs very deep. It is very broad. It is a matter that I've already raised with the new Attorney General, and I think it's really time for DEA, if it wants to continue with these authorities and anything like the same kind of administrative setup that it has now, to sit down and have a real internal come to Jesus session and think about what is going on over there. So that's just one person's recommendation, and I offer it to you as, again, somebody who started this job with a position of great respect and admiration for DEA because of what I saw on the investigative side. So in my years in the Senate, you've converted me, and you haven't converted me in a good way. And I would really urge you to take that to heart and to take advantage of this leadership change as an opportunity to take a real hard moment to take a look at how you're managing the administrative responsibilities and indeed whether you're the right agency to manage some of these administrative responsibilities. I'm sorry to have to say that, but I want to be candid with you. I think it's fair warning that you're entitled to, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I have just one more question. I would ask to either, are you two done? Okay.
Yes.
So my last question will be of Mr. Ranazzi and Captain Jensen. One of the barriers to effective coordination between your agencies that the report highlighted was that you do not have a common definition of the term drug shortage. So I'd like each of you explain how your respective agencies define drug shortage, the basis of the definition, and whether you believe that there's any prospect for your agency to agree to a common definition to enhance coordination.
I'll start this time. When we look, you've got to understand that we set the quotas based on the basic class of drug. For instance, oxycodone would be a basic class of drug. Morphine would be a basic class. We set the quota for that basic class of drug. We have no oversight of what the industry does with those drugs once we set the quota. They could divert those products to another product that they're making, which could potentially create a shortage. But because of the collaborative relationship we have with FDA now, and our mutual concern for shortages in the patient population, we're obviously going to look at each other's requirements, and based on FDASIA, if there's something we could do to help a shortage, we will do it. I just don't believe that post-FDASIA you're going to see issues, even with the definition of a shortage. I think one of the problems was some of the shortages were based on NDC numbers or National Drug Code numbers. We look at shortages based on basic class. But together with this relationship we now have with the MOU and with the work plans, we'll be able to better understand what their view of a shortage is. They could understand what our view of a shortage is, and we could work together collaboratively to make sure that shortage doesn't happen.
And I'll add to that. So when we get a report of a shortage, possible shortage, from a manufacturer, we don't just take the manufacturer's word. We get all the information from that manufacturer as well as the other manufacturers making that particular drug. We look at clinical interchangeability. So for example, morphine. We not only need, so we need morphine injection for hospital patients, but we also need oral tablets for patients that are at home, and then of course oral liquid for hospice patients. So there's a need for many different formulations of these controlled substances. So we look at a shortage as the impact on public health, the impact on patients, and is there enough of that particular drug that's needed for patients to supply the entire market. So we now, with our MOU, with our collaboration efforts, we're able to share all of that information with DEA. So we'll get them all of the information, including the reports that we hear from patients, which are most concerning, that they can't get the drugs they need. So we're sharing all of that with DEA so that they can know what the impact is out there and work with us, and that's happening.
Could I add one thing?
Go ahead.
Senator? I think I could speak for FDA and thanking you for FDASIA, because FDASIA did one thing that we've basically wanted for years. It put transparency in the system. FDASIA now allows us not only to work collaboratively, but if there is a shortage, we could use our databases and look through the databases and move people into companies to find out where the shortage is and how it happened, and then provide that information to FDA so they could post it. There is no more, saying that there's a shortage with no evidence of a shortage on our hand. Now we could share that information, provide the evidence necessary, and show. And I believe that's why, post-FDASIA, we have not had a shortage related to quota, because we know how much quota is out on the street.
I don't want to labor this, and I'm about done, but maybe you're telling me, I think I heard you say you don't have a common definition. Maybe you're trying to tell me that you don't need a common definition, and then I'm assuming that you did because of what GAO said. So where are you along the lines of what I just suggested?
I don't think we need a common definition because our definition is based on the statute. We must provide for basic class, the quantity of basic class necessary to address scientific, medical, and industrial needs for the country. Okay, if there's a shortage, we could go back and look. And if that shortage is based on any number of factors, we could help them, but the manufacturer has to request for an increase in that quota. While FDA could tell us that this manufacturer needs an increase in quota, the manufacturer must tell us before we could actually increase the quota. They have to go through the process. But I think we could work around it because I really believe that based on the new agreements, we could share the information and show them where the drug is, and we won't have a problem anymore. So the idea that we're creating a separate a definition is not necessary. The definition that we abide by is within the statute.
Yeah. Let me end by asking Dr. Cross, do you have, since you suggested the need for a common definition, do you have any rebuttal to what they've just said?
Well, I'm pleased to hear that they seem to be moving towards a more positive relationship. This is quite in contrast to what we heard from DEA during the course of our review, when they were quite dismissive of FDA's postings of shortages on their website, and in fact said that it was a tool that manufacturers were using simply to try to increase their quota allocation. I believe that the MOU is a very positive step, and I think that if they can develop the work plans and move forward, that this can be very effective in avoiding any future shortages of drugs. We believe that they have to at least reach a common understanding, and their statements today sound like they've made progress in that regard.
Okay. I thank you all very much, and I'll adjourn the hearing. Thank you all.